In this video, we're going to take the curl that we got from Webflow developers and grab our live items from our CMS collection, sort that list by custom date, and then return just our latest newsletter item. Let's get started. So let's take a closer look at this curl request. So we got this curl request from the import curl, and Webflow gives us this basically fake ID. We're not going to be using that. We're going to be using our own. So we're going to use our placeholder method and add a collection with the $sign. Oh, I can't think today. And we're going to use that so we can use replace. So that is the first filter that we're actually going to end up using, but before we know what we're going to replace it with, we have to go find our ID. And so we need the collection that we want the information from, and that collection is this newsletters collection here. It's at the top of your Webflow project, and we're just going to cut and paste that. And what we're going to do is we're going to go, the filter we're using, and we're going to use this over and over again with what we're doing, is replace. We're replacing the $sign collection that we created, and we're going to replace it with this. Now, you can add replacement text, or we could make this an input or something so that, say, for instance, you wanted to reuse this same kind of template and you had all the fields named the same and everything else in Webflow, you could just grab all of that information and change just the ID of the collection here, and that would allow you to create a newsletter for a completely different collection. You just have to make sure that all of your Webflow field data is the same. So we're going to update that. And the last thing we're going to do is we're going to use that bearer token that we got. So we're going to do another replace here. Oops, did it again. What you're going to want to make sure you do is if we add the filter here, it's going to add it to the array. So it adds it to this top thing. We actually want to go into the push that's being pushed into the array, and we want to add it to this value here. We want to replace this token with our Webflow bearer token. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a replace, but on this value here. And we're going to replace. That's the filter we use. And we are replacing. Webflow gives it this to us, so we're just going to grab this, and our replacement text, we have that Webflow bearer, and it's already saved in an environmental variable, so we can just use it. And we're going to give this a save, and then what we're going to do is we're just going to run and see what we get here. We have our variable set as newsletters. We'll give this a run, and let's see what we comes back with. And we get a response, and we have 4 newsletters now, so that is what we are expecting. We only really want one of those newsletters because we only want the information from one of them. So we have to get the latest newsletter. And so the way that we're going to do that is we first have to get this list of newsletters. So if we want this, we're just going to create a variable. And we're going to call this newsletter list. And the value, we're actually going to go run this little thing again. And we're going to copy the result. The result's going to give us all of this, and I'll show you why we want it. So we're going to grab the result. So we're just going to cut and paste. And then in our creating the variable here, in the value, we have our newsletters, but then we want to hit the subpath. We're copying and pasting that subpath in. Maybe it did it automatically for us. And then we hit define, and then it separates this into what we want. And what we actually want are the items. So if we go, we see we get a response, we get a result, and we want the 4 items. So that's what we want out of this. So we're going to save this. And now if we, what I like to do, and this is one of my favorite things to use, is a stop and debug. It's incredibly handy because we can drag it throughout, just down as we go. Newsletter list, and I want this, that's what I want to return from the stop and debug. So it's going to stop and debug at newsletter list here. So it's going to give us our result here. And so we can see here that it's just the items now. So we have just the 4 items, which is great. So we have one last thing that we want to do to this, and that is we want to actually add a sort right on it. Because once we add the sort, and what we want to sort by is the custom date. So we're going to sort in the ascending order of the custom date so that we get the most recent one first. And it already is doing that just because that's what the Webflow list looks like. But say for instance something in the publishing date changes and that's not the actual one we want because it's not the most recent because of the way that we did some sort of timed release or something like that. This ensures that we get the most recent, and we do that by using a custom date in our newsletter. So I prefer this method to anything published date or any of these other things because sometimes those things can change. Created date might not be the date you want it. So I'm an avid user of custom date whenever I do something that requires dates in Webflow CMS. So we just have just a custom date field, and that is what I'm going to be looking for to go the path. So I can do the same thing, and so we have the newsletters, and I need to find what it's called. So here is the custom date. So here we did the same kind of thing. We're defining custom date. What's a little different here is I don't need all of this because I'm only sorting by custom date. So that is what we want because we're getting it from the items anyway. So I've got this custom date, and I'm just going to update this, and I'm going to go save, and we're just going to run again. And it's because of the way that it actually was kind of filtering first, we're just going to make sure that this is actually working. And how we're going to do that is we're going to do a reverse on the sort. And so that way we know that the sort is working for us. It's a good thing to just, always check your work. And so we're going to do the sort, but what we're going to do is we're going to change this to false. And what this should do is it should reverse the sort order if the sort is working properly. So if we run it again, we can see that instead of it starting with 4, we're now starting with 1. So we know our sort is doing what it's supposed to be doing. We're going to put that back to true. And we have one last step. And that is, we just need the first item. We know that once we've done this properly, we know that we're going to get the sorted in the right order. So we just want that first item. So what we're going to do is we're going to create another variable. We're going to call this latest newsletter. And the value that we're actually going to get is newsletter list, and we have the list of items, but we just want the first item. And in JavaScript arrays, the first item is 0, and it goes 0, 1, 2, etc. So we're going to start with 0, and it's going to give us only the first item. So if we do this, and we want to pop our stop and debug underneath it, just so we can see, we're going to look for our latest newsletter this time. If we run this again, Now we only get one newsletter, which is exactly what we want because we're going to be pulling all of the information from the single newsletter. Now keep in mind, we have all of these kind of reference fields here, and if you were doing this and only pulling information from the API, you would have to do extra steps, for loops to get you'd have to do another API call to get all of the items for each of these new releases and for the news, etc., etc. But I have all of these tables already in Xano, and so I'm going to be just referencing the tables when we go through that in this part. But before we even get into that, let's take a look and set up our first replacement of that data in the MJML. And let's take a look and see how we put that together. Again. So the first thing that we need to create this variable, which is the variable that has the full MJML. So we have all of this code here. So we're going to take it from our unified version. The reason we're doing this is because if we have any spaces or anything like that, then Xano adds special characters to this. So what we're going to do is let's create a variable. And so this variable is actually going to change as we go through. We're going to just kind of keep stuffing things into this variable, replacing those parts that we want to in that variable, those different sections. That's the first kind of thing that we're going to be doing with this variable. So we're going to call this MJML full. And the variable value to start with is going to be this. If we just want to check our work, we just pull the stop and debug down, and we're going to stop and debug now our MJML full. So we've got our MJML full, we're going to stop and debug, and let's see what the output is. And here's the output. It just matches what we just pulled in from our code. But here you can see a little bit easier is we're going to replace the intro section. We're going to replace all these sections with the content that we're going to have. In this video, we're going to take the curl that we got from Webflow developers and grab our live items from our CMS collection, sort that list by custom date, and then return just our latest newsletter item. Let's get started.